Johnny Tom.
Hey guys, it's Johnny Com here, and I wanted to do a quick little intro for this video. What you're going to see here is old videos that I did for an old channel. It used to be called New Game Plus, and then I changed the name to Deja. They're years old. This was my second YouTube channel that I took kind of seriously in like the mid-2010s or something like that. Now, before that, I had another YouTube channel back in the early 2000s, if you can believe I've been around that long. I deleted that channel long ago, but back then I actually had a decent following. And we're building it up here now. Anyway, I just wanted to preface this video by saying these videos are old. I sound different if I'm in them, which I don't think I am. I look different. And just generally they're a little bit less high quality, I guess. They're still something that I'm proud of, and I figured I'd go ahead and share them with you. So this is just a compilation of a bunch of old videos from my old show and channel called Deja Vu. I hope you enjoy it. Pokemon. Back in the late 90s, this franchise popped up seemingly overnight around the world, with a cartoon, collectible cards, and over 150 fluffy creatures not of this world. It took no time for Pokemon to show up everywhere. I remember my first introduction to the series was at one of my birthday parties when I was younger. One of my friends gave me a pack of Pokemon cards as a gift. It sparked a flame in my eyes. I even remember some of the cards that I got in those first few booster packs. Pikachu, Bill, Bulbasaur, a potion, and like 3 energy cards. From there I was hooked. I had to have more. Anyway, in 1998 the video games were released on the good old Nintendo Game Boy. Red version and blue version. They seemed so awesome, and what franchise before this was big enough to warrant releasing 2 games simultaneously? I remember sitting at home and getting excited anytime one of the commercials came on the television.
You can't catch all 150 Pokemon by yourself.
So close.
You need a friend to trade with. Hit for lead. So you can grab a link cable and a friend with a Game Boy, and with both packs you can catch them all. Got ya.
These ads were awesome. How could you not want the games after seeing something like that? But it wasn't until a few months later when my mom decided to have a garage sale that I'd acquire the funds to buy the game, after selling tons of my old toys and other junk for cold hard cash. I remember going into Walmart, pointing to blue version through the glass case, watching the clerk grab the game, carrying it up to the checkout line while admiring the artwork, and to this day I still think this artwork is incredible. Ken Sugimori is one of my favorite artists of all time. Even the manual was gorgeous. Anyway, fast forward 30 seconds and I got in the car, ripped open the plastic wrap, put the cartridge into the Game Boy and turned on the power. And at that moment, the biggest journey in my life up to that point had begun. Now you have to understand, as a 6-year-old, this was a magical experience, comparable to your first trip to Disney World. There was a whole world waiting for you to go out and explore it, all inside this little computer that you could carry around in your pocket. It allowed you to experience so much, picking a first pet, something I had not experienced in real life at the time, going on hikes, meeting new people, exploring forests, caves, abandoned warehouses, sea caverns, underground cockfighting rings run by gangs and mob organizations. We'll talk about that later. All of this in one game, inside of a world that you felt like you were actually a part of. This world felt like a second home, and sometimes it was so engrossing you really felt like you were in that world. And that might sound ridiculous to refer to as a life-changing experience, but it was. For kids like myself growing up at the time, this was an adventure. And for most, myself included, it was the first experience any of us ever had with the gaming genre known as RPGs. It was the first time we were allowed to go on these adventures on our own in any capacity. Our parents wouldn't let us explore a cave on our own in real life, but in Pokemon, in Kanto, you could explore and do so much more with the help of your Pokemon. The gameplay was simple enough. Walk around the environments and send out your Pokemon to fight either other wild Pokemon or other trainers' Pokemon. You exchange hits back and forth until someone's Pokemon faints. Then you continue your journey. Most of us didn't even know what an RPG was at the time. And Pokemon didn't really feel like one because it was so well disguised as this giant adventure game where you interact with this alternate world. I will never forget a single moment from this game. I vividly recall every single moment that happened during my first 48 hours with this game. Buying it, leaving the store, the car ride to my grandparents' house, how excited I got when my Squirtle evolved into a War Turtle, playing the game all day from purchase to bedtime and meeting Brock and Misty. And that's another thing, the way they included characters from the show in the game. It really made the characters more relatable, and you felt like you were forming friendships with them along the way. It added to the immersion and the sense that this world was something that you were a part of. You got to be Ash. You got to form the bonds with your Pokemon and the people you met along the way. You got to take down Team Rocket. You raised your starter from a cute and cuddly pal into a battle-hardened tank ready to tear apart any opponent that got in your way of being the best. Like no one ever was. All of this made me feel attached to this world, and I never wanted to leave that world. There were even nods to real-world movies and pop culture that made these worlds feel connected. For example, there's this TV in your house at the start of the game that when viewed states, "There's a movie on TV. 4 boys are walking on railroad tracks. I better go too." This is a direct reference to one of my favorite movies from my childhood, Stand By Me.
Any of you guys know when the next train is due?
And what about the casino? I mean, what kid didn't want to play the slots when they were 5 years old? I remember waking up at 3 a.m. at my grandparents' house that night and turning on the lights just to play some more. I was willing to give up sleep to play this game, and I can confirm that at age 6, it's not a good idea to explore Lavender Town at 3 a.m. I didn't get to play for too long though. My grandma found me and she made me go back to bed. Thanks, Grandma. When I woke up the next day, I continued to play all day, raising and catching Pokemon, facing gym leaders, saving cities from the clutches of Team Rocket. When my mom called, my grandparents sounded so frustrated that I didn't want to do anything with them. I was too busy trying to catch all of the Pokemon I could find and exploring every area just so I could try to see if there was something new that I didn't see before. And when my War Turtle finally evolved into a Blastoise, forget it. All bets were off. I was addicted. I had formed a deep emotional bond with my Blastoise at that point. He had become my best friend, even if he wasn't real. Anyway, I guess what I'm trying to say is that these games showed kids my age so many things. It pulled me into this new world and took me out of reality. It introduced me to RPGs, and it made me understand that games can be an emotional journey thanks to the experiences that are written into them. Pokemon wasn't just a game about catching them all or being the best trainer or becoming the Pokemon League champion. Those are just the things that sum up the ultimate goal of the gameplay. At the time, we may not have realized it, but we were really playing it because we were building memories through the experiences the game offered. From raising our virtual monster friends to exploring environments like abandoned factories and forests that seemed exciting and real because the game just had a way of really pulling players into its world. It's hard to define what made it all so special, but it was special to us, and it always will be. We'll never be able to experience something like this in our lives again. We'll never feel the same attachment because we'll never be as innocent or impressionable as we were when we were younger. I'm just glad that I got to grow up with these amazing games. And I guess in the end, that happy nostalgia kind of says it all. Pokemon Blue will always be my favorite portable game. I still play it to this day, and I'm sure I'll continue to play it until the day I die. Because to this day, I can still capture a small moment of those times when I was younger anytime I fire up these games. Even if that moment only lasts a few seconds, it's all I need to make me smile. Professor Oak, thanks for giving me my first Pokemon. You have no idea how much of an impact you had on millions of children just like myself. Even if you were just some numbers in a computer program, you'll always be real in our hearts. Look, I couldn't help myself, okay? I talked about Pokemon Blue, I've had to talk about Pokemon Red. And eventually, I'll probably talk about my experiences with Pokemon Yellow, Gold, Silver, and all the other games too. But anyway, let's continue with the story. After I got Pokemon Blue, it was obvious that I loved video games to everybody around me. My eyes were constantly glued to the screen of either my red Game Boy Pocket or my Kiwi Green Game Boy Color. I feel like I never stopped playing Pokemon Blue when I was younger, so when Christmas 1998 rolled around, I wasn't prepared for what awaited me. Socks! Clothes! Hooray! No, but seriously, I got Pokemon Red. Looking back on it now, it wasn't that big of a deal. The only difference between these games were the Pokemon that were available in each one, but that didn't stop me from loving them. Now at this point, I had played through Pokemon Blue enough times to know the whole game backwards and forwards. I had raised all of the starters, so I wanted to try something new, and something that to this day has become my standard in all Pokemon games. Instead of using one of the 3 traditional starters, I decided I'd catch another Pokemon as soon as possible and immediately toss my starter to the side. Now, there weren't many to choose from. Rattata, Nidoran, Spearow, Caterpie, none of these would do. I needed something good, something majestic, something epic, powerful. Chip! 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 Okay, maybe not the monster you pick to fight your battles for you, but this Pidgey would grow, evolve, and become one of the best Pokemon I'd always remember raising. This would also start other fun challenges I'd create for myself, like beat the game using only water types or only use Pokemon that evolve once. The games fostered that creativity because of the options of over 150 unique monsters you could have on your team. To this day, I still enjoy playing these games this way. I'll usually pick one version to do a vanilla playthrough, and then the other one I'll mod with a Game Shark so that I can use a different Pokemon to start the game with. And then sometimes I'll play them both legitimately, like my most recent run where I finally caught all 151 Pokemon legitimately, including Mew with a glitch. Like I mentioned in the Pokemon Blue video, it's almost impossible to give one solid reason as the ultimate statement to explain why Pokemon was so special to kids growing up in the 90s. But I do have a few more ideas about it that I'd like to discuss. For one, it was pretty genius how they were able to make each of the games feel fresh and unique to one another with only a few minor changes. With version-exclusive Pokemon, the encounters with Pokemon were exciting a second time through. I remember searching through the abandoned factory near Cerulean City for hours trying to find an Electabuzz in Red version. And when I encountered a Scyther in the Safari Zone, I screamed in excitement. Not only did the version-exclusive Pokemon add a fresh take to the games, but a social aspect was there as well. I remember trading and battling between all 3 versions of the games with friends constantly. Man, all the batteries we went through. Another thing that always entertained me, and maybe it was just me, was that when I played Blue version, I always felt like I was playing as myself, and when I played Red version, I felt like I was playing as my rival from Pokemon Blue. And subsequently, my imagination would take flight and I'd even roleplay as Gary from the anime in the game, and use only Pokemon I'd seen him use in the show.
I think Palatown deserves at least one trainer who's not a total embarrassment.
I was a weird kid. One of the other things that I thought was mind-blowing when I was younger was the color of the palettes when you played Red and Blue on the Game Boy Color. Blue version had these colors that looked like blue and pink, while Red version had a palette of red and green. It was the little things that made these games feel unique, folks. I just had to bring these games up again. Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow turned 20 this year. Being 24, I quite literally grew up with these games. This franchise has been a huge part of my life. It's honestly so special to me that I can talk about it for hours, to the point where it probably annoys quite a few of my real-life friends. To this day, I still play the new games whenever they're released, and I'm still building memories because of that. And though they may not be as influential in my life as the originals, the new games still make me reminisce of the times I spent playing my Game Boy and all of the Pokemon friends that I made. And since the games were released again on the Nintendo 3DS, not only was I able to experience this again, but a new generation of kids are going to be able to experience the same thing. Maybe they'll have just as many memories with them. Or they could hate them because of the awful graphics. That could happen too. But with the announcement that the virtual console releases of these games are actually going to be supported by Pokebank, allowing you to take Pokemon from the first generation all the way to Sun and Moon, I have a feeling that the graphics won't be too much of an issue. The fun factors on these games is set at 11. Call me what you want, a Gen 1er, or just a nostalgic fool, but none of the new Pokemon games will ever be as magical as Pokemon Red, Blue, or Yellow. Except maybe Generation 2, those are great too, but I'll discuss those in another video. So let me just start by saying that even though I will be talking about the Sonic Genesis games as a whole in this video, I'll primarily be focusing on two of the games, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and Sonic & Knuckles. When we were younger, my brother had a Genesis in just two games, Mortal Kombat 2 and Sonic 2. I actually had another blue love in my life before Mega Man, Sonic the Hedgehog. This lightning-fast hedgehog was everything cool about the 90s. He had the look, the attitude, the lingo, he had games, a comic book, a TV show, SpaghettiOs. He even became the poster boy for Sega. And let me tell you, he had some stiff competition.
Gotta go. Hey, guy, you're the first serious gamer I've seen all morning. Check this out. Brand new 16-bit Super Nintendo with Super Mario World. Wow!
What's this one?
Oh, this is a Sonic the Hedgehog from Sega Genesis. Hey, look at these radical colors, huh?
Wow, Sonic's fast, too.
No, over here.
I like Genesis, and it costs a lot less.
Wait, kid, that game
I'll
there.
take Sonic and Genesis.
I knew that.
Sonic the Hedgehog. More action, more speed. Sega Genesis, it's a whole lot more for less.
Anyway, I don't remember the first time I played this game. My brother probably owned it well before I was born, so I basically grew up playing it a lot. I remember I was an early bird when I was younger. I would quietly sneak into my brother's room, turn on the TV, crank down the volume, and play Sonic 2 on his Genesis until he inevitably woke up and kicked me out. Like I said, we only ever had two Genesis games, but we did rent Genesis games at the local Blockbuster and movie gallery all the time. One day I walked in and tried to rent the Jungle Book game. When it happened, an employee walked right next to me, placed another box on the shelf, and there it was. Now, let me explain. When I was little, the internet wasn't widespread. You didn't usually know when games released. Usually you found out by seeing it when you were just out shopping, and when you saw a new game from a franchise you knew and loved, your eyes lit up. You had to have it. And when I saw this, I didn't believe it. Forget the Jungle Book, I have a new Sonic game. Now, I recognize this silhouette, that's Sonic. But who's this guy? Who's Knuckles? Why is he important? What about Tails? So like I said, it was difficult in the 90s to keep up with the latest game releases. Especially when you're like 5 years old. I thought this was the sequel to Sonic 2. I'd never heard of Sonic 3 and wouldn't until a few months later. So, as far as I knew, there was only one other Sonic game. Obviously, Sonic the Hedgehog 1, which I also hadn't played. So getting my hands on Sonic and Knuckles was kind of like a second birthday. I can't explain the intense excitement I felt checking out at Blockbuster with this game, and the 5-minute card ride home seemed like it lasted an eternity. But thank goodness my brother decided to rent a movie that night, because that meant I had a 2-hour date with uninterrupted gaming bliss. Ah, this was so awesome. The graphics were improved, the sprites were more detailed, the environments were more alive, and I still had no idea where the hell this Knuckles guy came from, but he was cool, and when I found out he could glide, just so damn cool. The gameplay isn't really much different from the previous games. Sonic still runs fast, but he also gets some neat new power-ups depending on shields he can acquire. Tails still flies, and Knuckles offers the biggest changes with gliding and wall climbing abilities. But the gameplay isn't anything most of us aren't familiar with, and I want to focus on what made this game cool to me as a kid, which was the discovery of something new from a franchise I love. You don't get to experience that these days. Now, when a new game is even thought of by a developer, it's announced before it's anywhere near finished. Then tons of websites publish stories about it, and you get hyped up for months, sometimes years before the game is out for the public. And these games rarely live up to that hype, so you don't get to take that risk of just finding a game and trying it out anymore. And that might save you some money every now and then, but it also denies you such a great feeling when you discover that hidden gem that you weren't expecting to be good. But anyway, since we've covered the game and the nostalgia I have with it, let's talk for a moment about the hardware of the cartridge itself. Well, it looks like a normal cartridge, but what's this thing on the top? It almost looks like you could put another game in there and then... Oh, wow. Ladies and gentlemen, what you are looking at here is DLC in its infancy. By putting Sonic 2 or Sonic 3 on top of the Sonic & Knuckles cartridge, you can play as Knuckles through either of those games. This seemed like witchcraft to me. I mean, here's Sonic 2, a game that I knew front to back, and yet it feels like a brand new game just because of a new playable character. In a way, it felt kind of cheap. The gliding and wall climbing abilities that Knuckles provides almost feels game-breaking in certain stages. But that's what made it so damn fun. I was able to find new areas that I didn't even know existed previously. Games will probably never do something like this again. With a few exceptions, DLC will never be as exciting as this. With all the advances in gaming technology today, I think some developers forget that simplicity and additional content can be the best way to breathe life into their games. Plague of Shadows for Shovel Knight being a beautiful example of how it can work in modern gaming. In the aspect of simplicity, Sonic & Knuckles was way ahead of its time, something Sega would sort of develop a penchant for. I just wish some developers would take a second to look at things like this and understand that those small touches are what take a game from a B to an A+ experience. Those are the experiences we as gamers remember the most, and for Sega, at the time, there was no lack of these moments. So this is kind of like an add-on to the video, and something that I just wanted to talk about real quick. Now, on the date that I'm talking about this was probably about a week ago. It was actually confirmed by some Sega employees and people that worked on Sonic the Hedgehog 3 that, yes, Michael Jackson did in fact actually work on the music for the game. It's just something that I wanted to add on and talk about because music has always been really important in my life. Yes, video games are equally as important, but I do love music a little bit more. I've been in tons of bands, musicals, theater productions, things like that, and music has always been one of the most powerful influences on everything that I do. Just to hear that a prolific musician like Michael Jackson actually took the time to look at video games and understand that they can be a form of expression is amazing to me, especially when it's somebody that everybody respects like MJ. It's been obvious for years that, yes, there were definitely tons of nods to his music in the tracks for Sonic the Hedgehog 3, but to finally hear it confirmed that he actually worked on them is amazing to me. It's just something that I wanted to bring up because I feel like games sometimes get shrugged off as something that's not in any way an art form, when in fact I think that's the exact opposite. Video games are pretty much the sum total of all expressive art. You have somebody that works on the music, somebody who works on the visuals, somebody who works on scripting, somebody who has to program this on a computer, which, if you ask me, is an art in itself. Anyway, it's just something that I wanted to talk about, so I hope that you could agree with me on some aspect there, and let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I hope that you have a great week. Kirby's Dreamland. Back when I was around maybe 7 or 8, I don't know, the date ranges of these times aren't something I exactly kept logged when I was younger. Anyway, I was a little kid and I went over to a friend's house, and thanks to his older brothers, he had tons of hand-me-down Game Boy games. We used to sit down and watch a movie like The Mask or Liar Liar, and of course, play Game Boy games throughout the entirety of it. Now, when I said tons of Game Boy games, I meant it. They must have had at least 100 of them. We used to spend entire days just sitting there, pulling random games out of the bin and trying them out. I remember Alleyway and Bomberman being some of my favorites, but one day, I found Kirby in the lot. I popped the game in and I was awestruck. What I thought was going to be a pretty terrible game turned out to be one of the best little adventure titles to ever grace a portable console. You play as this little round floaty puffball named Kirby. Suck up enemies and then shoot them back out at other enemies to clear the path to the end of the stage. This was the first game in the series, and Kirby wouldn't acquire his ability to use his enemies' powers until the sequel. But that didn't stop this game from being awesome and being really creative. There are a few bosses and all of them are just as lively as the stages that they inhabit, with a personality defined by just the simple actions of their movements and attacks. I especially love this little cloud guy. I honestly always feel kind of bad beating up on the enemies in Kirby games. They seem so cute and innocent. I mean, who's the real bad guy here? Anyway, this game was so great that it spawned tons of sequels and spin-offs over a very short time period. The game was so good on a portable console that the second game made the jump to a home console, the NES. And the other games, like Kirby's Tilt and Tumble and Star Stacker, were just as fun in their own way. And a few years later, Kirby would even get his own cartoon series, which I'm kinda half and half on. I love the show, but DDD's voice is kinda laughable. It's just not how I think he would actually sound. Anyway, Kirby's Dreamland is still fun to pick up and play today. Even though it's short and can be completed in just about half an hour, it's a half hour well spent. I still suggest trying it out, if only for its charm and cute narrative that it tells using only visual aids. It's a special kind of game that truly creates its own world, and a world that I love to visit whenever I'm feeling nostalgic or homesick, reminiscing about simpler times when I was a kid with no cares in the world. Simplicity was Kirby's main strength, and it still works to this day. Most recent Kirby games still use a similar formula, sometimes adding new elements, but for the most part, they're still cute platformers that we've come to know and love. If you're really late to the party and still haven't played a Kirby game, get on it. I guarantee you that you're in for a great treat. Today is a very special episode. This is one where you guys are going to hear stories involving some of my childhood friends. Sadly, I don't talk to most of these people anymore. We grew up and slowly drifted apart. It wasn't anything personal, just part of growing up, I guess. Anyway, as mentioned previously multiple times, I grew up with only 2 game consoles when I was younger, the Nintendo Entertainment System and the Sega Genesis. I had plenty of games to enjoy on my Nintendo because it was a hand-me-down from my brother, but after a few years, it started to get stale. I think we had somewhere around 40 games, but many of them weren't that great. For every Mega Man and Double Dragon, there was a Back to the Future or Bad Dudes to level the playing field. This memory is one of the foggier ones, but I do remember it. I was leaving a flea market with my mom on a cold day. As we were about to reach the exit, I saw a woman with Nintendo games. She was packing up shop for the day, but being a child, I shouted, "She's got Nintendo games!" And thank God I did, because something magical happened after that. My mom walked over to the booth and asked how much she wanted for the games. What was her response? 50 cents each. My mom then turned to me and said, "Pick 2. Words had never sounded so sweet. I get 2 new games? Have I died and gone to Nintendo Land? There were no Mega Man games in the bunch, no Castlevania or Final Fantasy, but then I spotted it. A yellow label, those familiar blue overalls, and a raccoon tail? I couldn't believe it. A copy of Mario 3 for only 50 cents. I had made my first choice, but what other game should I get? Oh, I like X-Men. Let's get that one! Yeah, X-Men was kind of disappointing, but it only sweetened the experience of my first time playing Super Mario Bros. 3. I'm sorry, it's so beautiful. This was the most visually stimulating game I had ever seen on the NES. It was bright and colorful with contrasting backgrounds that really made the sprites pop up off of the screen and helped the world appear more vibrant. And then there were the gameplay additions. The raccoon suit featured on the cover art, which allows you to fly after a short time running. The frog suit that allows you better mobility when swimming underwater. The Hammer Brothers suit, which is just the ultimate assault power-up. I really wish they would bring it back. And just so many other cool things that made it far superior to its predecessor. On top of all that, this was the first Mario game I played which featured this Monopoly board inspired overworld. What was neat about this is that if you're playing alone, you can get tons of bonus items. But if you're playing with another person, it creates a competition. You work together to complete the board, but you compete against each other to get the mushroom huts and other bonus stages for opportunities to get more reserve power-ups. Enter Steven. And Steven, if you're watching this, hi, how's it going? How's life? Mine's just fine, just, drowning in nostalgic memories that will probably haunt me until I die. See, Steven lived down the street. If you've seen my video on Kirby's Dreamland on the Game Boy, you've already heard about him. When I got home, I instantly called him to tell him of the treasures I'd acquired. When I mentioned Mario 3, it was settled. Steven bolted over on his bike, ran inside, we sat in front of the largest TV in the house, and started up Mario 3. Hold on, just gotta get this thing working. We're good! So once we finally got the game working, it became clear after just about 2 minutes that Steven had played this game before. He knew all of the pipes to slide down, all of the blocks to break, all of the hidden path locations. He was showing me everything I'd need to fully enjoy this game. I remember the first time he showed me how to get the flute in the first castle and how I sat there in awe at how incredible it seemed. Nowadays, we know secrets like this were programmed into the game intentionally, but when we were younger, it felt like you were beating the system, getting ahead in a way that wasn't intended. It felt dirty, and dirty felt good. It was the moments like this that developed into vivid memories from my childhood that I'll always remember and cherish. Memories of my family buying something for me just to make me happier, of the excitement in discovering something new but familiar, the joy of playing a game next to a friend for hours and never getting bored. Nintendo knows and knew even then that what makes gaming special is the recognition that player experience comes first. They always put out quality titles that combine something familiar with something new and innovative. And they still continue to this day to create new IPs with just as much ingenuity and carefully crafted development to this day. But I think Mario 3 is where that formula was perfected, and why it's hailed as one of the greatest NES games of all time. Nintendo still pays homage to this game in recent titles like Super Mario 3D Land on the 3DS and Super Mario 3D World on the Wii U. Without a doubt, trying to capitalize on nostalgic memories that fans like myself have, but that's okay. These are quality titles, and one day a kid who grew up with these games will talk about them in the same way that I'm talking about Mario 3 now. Because those are the games that they grew up with, just like how I grew up with Mega Man, Mario, Zelda, and other games. At this point, I'd say it's safe to say that Nintendo has become a part of our culture. At least enough so to warrant people like myself making videos on the internet about it. Every generation has to have some new form of entertainment media to grow up with, from theater to movies to music to gaming. Nintendo may as well be considered a strand in our pop culture DNA at this point. But at the very least, they've cemented themselves in the childhood memories of millions of kids worldwide, and that may be more important than anything else that their business has been based on. Now, I'll admit, these days I kind of have a love-hate relationship with Nintendo. Sometimes I feel like they've lost touch with what fans want and just do what they want. But so far, it seems like when that doesn't work out, they always find a way to bounce back. And honestly, that might just be what makes Nintendo the gaming juggernaut that it is in our hearts. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Where do I begin? When I was growing up, my experiences with the Super Nintendo were limited to whatever I was able to play at my friend's house. So basically I only remember a little bit of Kirby Superstar and how cool the Game Boy player was. Most of my childhood was ruled by the NES and the Game Boy. My earliest experiences with Zelda games were obviously the NES titles. I really loved Zelda too. Yes, I'm one of those people who actually prefers this title to the original. Sue me. I just like it because it's more of an RPG than the original game is. Anyway, I wouldn't get a chance to play any other Zelda game until years later with the Game Boy Advance. A Link to the Past was re-released on the system, but as far as I knew, this was a Game Boy Advance original. This was one of those buy it and take the risk of hating it later situations. Fortunately, I was in good hands. This game was awesome. The story is basic but engrossing. The world is bright and colorful, and it's just good old-fashioned top-down Zelda action. Now, a few years later, I'd acquire a Super Nintendo with A Link to the Past and build a lot of memories with that version of the game. This was the first time I actually attempted to beat the game, and I got to the end, but I never actually defeated Ganon. What I remember most is how the game's puzzles actually made me think. Some of them actually confused me. But maybe I'm just an idiot. Regardless, I'll always remember the experiences this game offers. When I filmed this footage, I was almost brought to tears by just how nostalgic the sound design was for me. The storm you hear from the safety of your house at the start of the game is implemented so well, and I vividly remember playing this part during a hurricane. It just made it all feel so real to me. Then tragedy struck when the storm outside took out the power. I had nothing to do, except for my fully charged Game Boy Advance SP. Now, obviously this meant I'd be starting the whole game over again, but I got nothing else to do, so let's go ahead and go for it. Yup, I marathoned this game through a hurricane, and I loved every minute of it. Sitting in the dark, the wind tearing things apart outside as I was curled up in a blanket playing one of the greatest games of all time. Even though I didn't experience this game upon its initial release, when I finally played it, it still struck a chord with me. And to this day, it's still my personal favorite Zelda game. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please share it, like it, and if you want more, please subscribe. Yeah, anyone who knows me knew this one was coming. In the past, I've talked about games like Pokemon and how they nurtured an emotional connection to a virtual world. But for me, if Pokemon is an emotional journey, then that makes Mega Man the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie of video games. As previously mentioned, in Song, my first experience with Mega Man happened when I was around 5 years old. I had to stay at my grandma's house for a few nights. I loved my grandma, but her house always kind of scared me. It was this giant cabin secluded on private property in the woods with a basement. The stuff nightmares are made of. But my fears would soon turn to excitement when I walked in and discovered that she had bought an NES at a flea market with a bunch of games to entertain herself and her grandchildren. She had the games you'd expect to see: Mario, Zelda, Bad Dudes. Look, I didn't say they were all winners. But then I came across one that I'd never seen before, Mega Man 2. So I decided that that was the first game I wanted to play, and the next few moments changed my life forever. This was so epic. This scrolling scene with a text crawl explaining the story was something special. It was cinematic, and the music made me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. And this shot of the title emblazoned to the left and Mega Man standing triumphantly on the top of a building, watching over the city, hair flowing majestically in the wind. This was the moment that I decided that Mega Man was my favorite video game character. Why? Well, because he was blue, and blue's my favorite color. Look, I was like 4 or 5 at the time. My major decisions in life were usually about as difficult as deciding between either McDonald's or Burger King for dinner. But it always seemed to be a good decision to choose blue heroes as my favorites. Mega Man, Sonic, Sub-Zero, Sparkster. It almost seemed like making your video game character blue in the 90s guaranteed a hit game. Okay, maybe not all of the time, but Mega Man, yes, all of my yes. This game is perfect, okay? 10 out of 10, 5 stars, game of the year, 360 no-scope, platinum trophy, a winner is you! Look, the game is really good. I mean, seriously, go try it, you'll love it. Go ahead, I'll wait. Once you pick a difficulty, you're taken to a screen with characters displayed in boxes. Coming off of games like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat 2, my brother and I thought this was a fighter select screen. You can imagine our confusion when I wound up in a forest in a blue jumpsuit. So I guess I get to play as the same guy on the title screen. So this guy is Mega Man. Well, he sure looks better than he does on the cover. So what can Mega Man do? Okay, so he runs around and jumps. This must be like Mario. So naturally I saw an enemy, ran towards them, lured them into my jumping range, and Okay, so that didn't work out how I planned, but I didn't die like I would in Mario, but that bar at the top of the screen got smaller. That must be my health bar. Now I'm just gonna stop and say that if you've seen Egoraptor's Sequelitis series, you know where this is going. The game teaches you how to play by allowing you these little mistakes before throwing you into the real meat of the game. So at this point, I knew jumping on the enemies would hurt me, not them. So how can I get past them? Well, the A button jumps, but what does the B button do? Whoa. Whoa. Whoa! So that's it, that's the gameplay. You run, jump, shoot, and fight all the way to the end of the stage. Okay, I made it. There's the end of the level. I did it. I've mastered the game. I'm surely the best gamer out there. Let's move on and what? Who are you? Hey man, calm down. Hey man, just calm down, just calm down, just wait a minute! Okay, so this was new. So you figure out the pattern of his attacks, defeat the boss, teleport away, and find yourself at a screen with a chubby little blue dude staring back at you. But what does that say? Get equipped with Leaf Shield. Why did I turn green? Well, anyway, on to the next stage. Wait, what's this in the pause menu? Oh hey, I turned green like I did on that screen back there. That's neat. Well, let's shoot some more enemies with my bust excuse me, I'm just gonna go change my pants. You get the boss's powers after you defeat them? This blew my mind as a kid. Forget Mario, he loses his power-ups if he so much as hits a turtle shell with his shoe, but Mega Man can use them as long as he has the energy. Not to mention he can switch between his power-ups at any time. He's like the Swiss Army knife of fighting robots. From this point on, I was addicted to Mega Man 2, determined to defeat every boss just to see what their powers were like. As a kid, this was not an easy task. My reflexes weren't fully developed at the time, but one fateful day, I had done it. I had cracked the code. I defeated each boss one by one, decoding their weaknesses, and then... This level still gets my blood pumping to this day. The sky, dark and depressing. The ground, dry and desolate. The music, epic and aggressive. Everything you've done up to now is built up to this moment. If you don't stop this madman, Dr. Wily, this is what the future holds. So you press on with everything you've learned, all the weapons you've earned, and all the skills you've developed as a player. You have to make it through the game's most challenging stages to defeat Wily. And this is where the game takes the lessons it's taught you seriously and gives you the ultimate tests to gauge if you're ready or not. You fight a giant robotic dragon that tests your ability to run and jump quickly before he attacks you and forces you into making quick decisions just to stay alive. A security system that attacks you with robots that act as rabid guard dogs. A giant tank that tests your reaction time to oncoming threats, which tests your ability to decide where the safest place to be is before defending yourself. And then the most difficult test. A room with laser beams spread throughout that test your resourcefulness and makes you analyze, strategize, and make use of your limited resources. Once you've overcome all of these challenges, you're challenged yet again. You find yourself in a room with teleporters, 8 of them to be exact. Wait a minute. I don't like where this is going. This was a gauntlet. Now that I'm older and I know all the boss's weaknesses, it's easy, but as a kid, this was like competing in the video game Olympics. You have to fight all of the bosses, and you don't know who's behind each teleporter. So you just have to throw caution to the wind, jump in each teleporter, and pray that you remember that boss's weakness. If you do manage to come out victorious, a 9th teleporter appears. So after psyching yourself up, you jump in and... oh man, there he is. Yeah, shoot him in the balls. Ouch, okay, that didn't work, but that's it. I beat it. I beat the game. That's the last guy. I made it. I am awesome. This wasn't in the script. I'm out. I quit. It's too much. Okay, so anyway, you kick his ass again, and that's it. You're done. You've proven you're the best robot, and you've beaten the entire game. Come on! So yeah, just when you think you've done it, the game pulls a fast one on you and reveals another level. At first, this was the most frustrating thing in the world to me. I mean, you keep bait and switching me, I keep chasing the carrot on the stick, but then I realized this wasn't really a level at all. It's more of a build-up. There's no music, just silence. There are no enemies in your way or pits to fall down, you're just running into a cave while drops of molten lava fall down behind you. About 20 seconds later, you're at that familiar gateway. You know there's something on the other side waiting to take you down. So you take a deep breath, take what may be your final steps into the room, into darkness, and Wily arrives. And after his entrance, he reveals himself to be... An alien? Okay, well, I guess it beats fighting a goddamn wall in Wily Stage 4. When I first fought this guy, I thought the obvious way to beat him was going to be using the standard Plasma Buster. But no, the game programmers decided that'd be too easy. So you search through the arsenal until you find out that it's bubbles. It's bubbles. Bubbly. That's how you beat aliens. I mean, what is this? Signs? What I consider to be the most useless weapon in the game is the only way to damage this guy. And you gotta get up real close and personal too, because the bubbles have the range equivalent to that of a knife in a gunfight. But I persevered, figured out his pattern, whittled his health down, and defeated Wily. The screen flashes, the alien is revealed as nothing more than just a hologram as Wily grovels at your feet before the credits roll. And that's the end. You've beaten one of the greatest NES games of all time. Now, I have a confession to make. After just the first day of watching me play Mega Man 2, my grandma knew that I loved this game with all my heart, and in seeing that, she decided to let me take it home. This was a cherished gem to me. It was always either in my Nintendo or at the very top of my stack of games. I played it every day, but one year the PS2 was released, and for my birthday that year I got a lot of cash, almost enough to buy a PS2. Up to that point, all I had ever owned was an NES, a Game Boy, and a Sega Genesis. I made the biggest mistake of my life trading in all of these consoles and all of the games I had for them in order to afford the PlayStation 2. With such classic games as Mega Man 8 and Portal Runner. God, what was I thinking? Don't get me wrong, I loved the PlayStation 2 and it allowed me to discover a lot of great modern games. But I'll never forget the pain and sadness that washed over me when I handed over that copy of Mega Man 2. If I had the chance, I'd go back and keep just that game, but then maybe I never would have discovered franchises like Mega Man Legends or Ratchet & Clank. Both games that I have tons of memories with, but for all the memories that I formed with that console, none of them will ever live up to the wonderful experience I had with Mega Man 2. Mega Man 02. This game is so badass. I first discovered this game around the time when the internet was first becoming a viable source for information on goings-on in the world. I saw a screenshot of Mega Man 02 on some archaic old GeoCities fan site. This was the period of time when I discovered that there were more Mega Man games than just the classic and the X series. When I heard about the Zero series, I was super excited. I knew all about Zero because of Mega Man X, and I always kind of preferred swords to guns, so I had to have these games. I remember to find a copy of Mega Man 02, I had to take every opportunity that came to go out shopping with my mom. One day we went to some outlet mall that had a Funko Land. This must have been one of the last stores still bearing that name. I walked in and was delighted to find that they had a used copy of Mega Man 02. So of course I bought it. And I was not disappointed. This game was Mega Man X turned up to 11. It improved on the gameplay that was already perfected in the X series and added so much more. Mega Man as a series is known for its run, jump, and shoot mechanics, but being able to destroy every enemy with Zero's Z-Saber makes you feel so gnarly. Yes, I just used that word seriously. The story in the Zero series as a whole was super dark and serious, and it actually felt like what you were trying to do was important. Your actions held weight in this world, and it made you feel so epic. The characters are actually awesome too, and they're in the games that follow, and you actually care about what some of them say. The whole time they're cheering you on and aiding you, you can't help but get attached to them. Even these little cyber elf guys that you collect along the way kind of have a Pokemon feel to them, and you grow attached to the ones that you enjoy most because of how they aid you throughout the stages. All in all, this is one of my favorite action games on the Game Boy Advance. It's not quite as nostalgic as the other games in the series for me, and it's also not the best one. But it was my introduction to Mega Man Zero, and I specifically remember the first time that I played Zero 2, and all of the fun that I had with it. Gyruss is a unique shoot-'em-up on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Rather than shooting up or left to right, you rotate your ship around the edges of the screen and shoot towards the center, earning points and building up your arsenal with power-ups along the way. Occasionally, a bonus stage will pop up, where the goal is to shoot down as many of these aliens as possible before they can get away. After every 3 or so stages, a boss appears. And I always really liked the boss designs in this game. They're simple, but cool to look at. I really like the way they're animated. The fights themselves aren't too tough, you blow them up, rinse and repeat. But as a child, I was drawn to this game because it made me feel like I was a pilot in a Star Wars movie, flying into space through the screen and into the final frontier. I spent a lot of time playing Gyruss. It's the kind of game that's so simple that it never really gets old. I never got that far as a kid, but I remember the amazing music and arcade-like bonus stages being some of my favorite things about it, even as a child. There's nothing super deep or emotional about it, no big story or groundbreaking plot twist. I mean, the most I ever understood about the story is that apparently there's this big red Darth Maul looking guy who's trying to take over the universe. And trust me, this game is way better than the Star Wars prequels. This is just a good old-fashioned, fun to pick up and play, pulse-pounding action game. What the NES is known for. A style that I think is what made the NES such a great experience. You just pop in a cartridge late at night alone in your room and zone out into the glow of your 12-inch tube television. The hiss of the monitor rings in your ears and you play until you pass out. Nights like those are the ones that I remember most, when I was all alone with my imagination and maybe a glass of Mountain Dew. Maybe I'm just getting older, but it really feels like games nowadays just can't give you that feeling anymore. Anything that tries to be this simple just ruins it with an overcomplicated story or an overarching theme. They're so complex, they don't allow you to use your imagination. They just throw information at you and that's it. That's the story. That's the setting. And you're stuck in someone else's vision, what they want you to experience. Playing these games that allowed you that creative freedom in your head really makes me miss the old days. But these games are still around and I can still feel that sense of childlike wonder anytime I pop a game like Gyruss in. My imagination creates those scenarios, and that's truly special. Games today are great for what they are, deep storytelling tools that allow a player to connect to a character emotionally. But the NES was able to convey the emotion of fun and the joy of accomplishment with much less to work with, and Gyruss is the perfect example of how that worked. The Gyruss series hasn't seen any sequels or re-releases over the years, and that kinda sucks because this game is awesome. So if you haven't played it, go and pick it up. It's definitely worth the $8 or so that the cartridge will cost you. And if you can't enjoy the game in the same way I was able to, you'll at least be able to experience what I consider to be one of the best shoot-'em-ups out there. There's really nothing else like it out there, and I'll keep holding out for the hopes of a sequel someday. Oh man, it's Duck Hunt. Now what can I say about this one? The whole point of the game is as follows. You, hunter, duck, target, dog, condescending. Your goal is to shoot down as many of these ducks as possible before your time runs out with just 3 shots available in each set. I got so mad at this game as a kid. I remember the real thing that would upset me wasn't the dog at first, it was my family. I was a little kid, I didn't know how to aim, I expected instant gratification, that I could just pull the trigger and win. But when I didn't, and the dog laughed at me, it was my brother or my parents who would make fun of me, and I'd just wish I could take out my frustrations on that damn dog because of it. Duck Hunt is a light gun game. Light gun games use technology that basically works like an old camera. No, not like the ones on your phone. Damn kids. You pull the trigger on the gun, the majority of the screen flashes black, and one spot on the screen flashes white. The gun then takes a photo of the screen, and if the white block is in your sights on the light gun, it registers it as a hit. Now, what you're seeing here is footage that I captured with my Retron 5, and since it's playing on a modern TV, I can't hit anything. So I also shot some footage using my top loader NES on an old CRT television so you can actually see how the game works. The reason why light gun games don't work on modern TVs is a topic of debate. Some say it's due to refresh rates of the images, others say it's because the screens aren't curved. Me, I just say it's because it's old technology and just not made to work with new technology. I mean, have you tried installing a Windows 95 game on Windows 10? Yeah, it's kinda like that. I was pretty awful at this game when I was younger, so I used the tried and true stick the gun directly on the TV screen to hit the ducks guaranteed method. Works every time. Now that I'm older, however, I'm pretty great at it, and it's one of my favorite pick up and play titles whenever I'm feeling particularly lazy, or if I just decided that I hate ducks that day. It's a fun game to play when you just want a laid back experience that doesn't require much effort on your part. But you will still occasionally miss the ducks, and this dog will ridicule you to your grave. Asshole. I'm actually a huge fan of Duck Hunt as a character duo though, partially in thanks to their recent inclusion in the latest Super Smash Bros. Games on the 3DS and the Wii U. He went from being a smug jerk to an adorable little puppy with a cute little duck friend in my eyes. I even bought the amiibo for the Duck Hunt duo just because you never see Duck Hunt merch. I had to have it. Duck Hunt was released as a standalone cartridge, but most people know it as the pack-in game paired with Super Mario Bros. On one cartridge. You know the one, the cartridge that idiots try to sell on eBay for $50 because it's rare. And yes, that's with air quotes. This game is as common as unflushed shit in a public toilet. I'll always remember Duck Hunt as the original first-person shooter. An experiment that paved the way for games to come in the future like Time Crisis or Area 51. And if nothing else, I'll always remember that stupid dog's cackle. Now I know what you're thinking, Jonathan, this game is new, it only came out a few years ago, how can it possibly be nostalgic already? Well, I'll tell you. Let's travel back to the year 2013. At the Electronic Entertainment Expo, otherwise known as E3, the PS4 was announced, to much hype. It became a must-have to the masses almost instantly. The next day, I drove up to my local GameStop and pre-ordered a PS4 for myself. The wait seemed like an eternity, and when November 15th finally rolled around, I waited in line in the cold for hours. I was fourth in line to get this thing. I couldn't wait any longer. When I finally got my PS4, I rushed back to a friend's place, and we played it for quite a while that night. In the next few days, I spent tons of time playing Killzone Shadowfall and Knack, but then I downloaded a free-to-play title. Warframe had me hooked within the first 3 minutes. I'll be honest, I didn't have a clue what was going on with the story in this game, and I still don't to this day. That doesn't really matter though. What drew me to this game is its fast-paced, action-fueled, ninja-slashing, third-person shooter gameplay. If that sounds like a mouthful, that's because it is. The depth to customizing your Warframe and how they'll be useful in battle is amazing. It's just so damn fun running around shooting and cutting enemies down, running on walls, walking on wires, and executing the occasional stealth assassination. Why is this game nostalgic to me, even though it's still considered new? Because when I think about the PS4, I think back to that first week with the console, the events that I attended, and the amount of time I spent locked in my room playing Warframe, and how much money I spent on in-game purchases. When I recorded this footage, playing Warframe again made me want to keep playing it. I was instantly transported back in time to when I first played it, and that's why I'll always remember Warframe. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please share it, like it, and if you want more, please subscribe.
All targets eliminated. Let's get out of here.